Dun, 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 dun,
Are
dun,
we
dun,
here? Are we all live? Nobody's muted.
dun, dun.
I'm not muted.
We are.
The slides
Not
are
yet.
down.
Not yet.
We've survived. We've
There's
survived
always
another
another
thing.
couple hours to go before somebody's muted, so it's good. We're fine.
Yeah.
So I am back for at least a little bit.
Yay!
Yay.
Yay.
It's
Yay.
just work. You know, it's a good thing. But you know, there's a meme somewhere. I don't have access to it right now, but it says for AI to replace developers completely, project managers are going to have to learn to describe exactly what they want. We're safe.
Yes.
No question. We're safe.
So Fearless Leader's not here right now. He's stuck in a taxi. Scott is the acting manager. Scott, why don't you sequence us up here?
Yeah, I guess we have some other things that we do need to do we not?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely. By the way, Simon has access to all of these slides. So we're going to be doing this all sans slides.
Oh no.
Here.
Oh no.
We're going to shorten it.
Yeah.
Ad
and
hoc.
Do be excellent to each other. Don't.
Yes. Not be excellent.
How do I phrase this family friendly? Well,
not
no.
be excellent. That works.
No, excuse me.
It's a tautology.
No bigotry, no misogyny, no stupidity. There we go.
Most importantly, do not post your question repeatedly because you will lose your place in line.
Yep.
That's really the most important thing for the live people here today. Thanks for getting up early if you had to get up early. Thanks for tuning in late if you had to tune in late. Thank you for being live on this show. It helps us make a show. We already had one question before we even started, so that I really enjoy because I get to do my job really early on, which is being the question magician for this show, which is I'm watching in the live chat for you to put Q : in front of your things. That's your Q.
Which
Scott.
we're getting to that.
Okay.
Ahead of the class here. We're still back on do's and don'ts.
Without a script, we're just off script. I'm telling you, we got to get all the stuff in.
Some people don't know how to do improv.
We're still. I know how to do improv. This.
Anyway, getting
this
back to it here. Do be excellent to each other. Don't advertise that you need a job, please. If anybody is interested, the real way to find a job, in all seriousness, is to get known in the community. Go to conventions if you can. Go to Google developer groups. What ends up happening is when somebody needs somebody, they call somebody they know. So if you're not going out and meeting people, then you're not going to get those calls. Hey, speaking of people, hey, Marco and I are having a pretty cool little discussion on LinkedIn. Anyway, as we were saying about the questions go at the bottom of the list. If you put your question goes up and up, and then you ask it again, we take it out from here and we put it back on the bottom of the list. So the way to make sure your question never gets answered is to keep asking it. Let's see. Other than that, pretty much just have a good time. Remember, we have at least basic standards. This isn't Reddit. And that's really about it. Put a Q in front of your questions, or Randall won't know to click on that thing and flag it to us, because we have a little flagging system that tells us what the questions are.
So we should introduce ourselves, probably, Scott.
Thought you already did introduce me. I'm the only one who counts.
No, okay. Well, then the only one that counts is Scott, and he's here. So the rest of us are just filling in the other three corners of the screen. That's all.
I'm on the invisible slide though now.
Yes, right. The slide we didn't see.
That's true. The slide that we don't have.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm on the invisible slide.
Thank you, Simon. I know you're listening.
And John's here enough that we should start getting him some sort of icon on that screen too.
Well, okay.
Definitely.
In
Definitely,
in all seriousness, let's do some introductions. My name is Scott Stahl. I am a Flutter community leader, co-organizer of GDG Cleveland, which is Google Developer Groups, a bunch of other stuff you probably don't care about. I do some work with other folks here, and I also do my own thing under Good Dog Apps. Who's next?
I'll take the second spot here. I'm Randall Schwartz. I'm here frequently. I am the question magician, but I'm also in real life a Dart and Flutter Google developer expert, one of 10 in the US. And that means that I spend a lot of time answering your questions on all the socials on Discord and Stack Overflow and other places like that. And I also am a full-time Flutter developer. So this is really cool as well. That's probably me.
I'm Danielle. I'm not a GDE yet. I hope to be someday.
Yeah.
And hopefully number 11 in the US comes from this screen.
Cool.
Anyway, I lead a small team of Flutter developers at a company called Early, and yes, a small team, not a team of small.
Oh, okay.
And I had a lot of fun at F3 last week, so that was neat. And anyway, that's how can I forget though? I'm one of the co-organizers of the Flutteristas, and we have a conference coming up, and so that's going to be over a month. And I'll get you more details as we get the actual schedule and stuff like that sorted out. And it's virtual. It's going to last about 12 hours, so that hopefully anywhere you are in the world, there will be a time that's convenient for you to hop on and see parts of it. And I'll since I'm on here with this, we couldn't do it without the community. So you guys are all amazing. Thank you for all your help you give us. And that's me. And I guess that leaves us with John.
Yeah. So John Weezy, I'm the maintainer of the Flutter Medium for the community, and I've been hanging out here for a long time. I sit with Randall in Discord most of my day when I'm not doing my day job. Answering questions.
He's down the hallway, though. I don't see him when he's on.
Yeah.
Down the hallway.
Yeah. So my day job. So that's so my day job is a software architect engineer at Microsoft, which probably is a good segue into just quickly mentioning that none of us work for Google, so we can't answer any questions about plans because we don't know them or anything like that. So just we tend to mention that every week, but just figure throw that out right away.
Yep. Cool. That's a very good point. There are times when we do get confused with Googlers. The most interesting one actually was DroidCon 2018. Because Google sent us a bunch of nice Flutter t-shirts so that we could wear them while working the Flutter community booth, the Flutter London booth, actually, at DroidCon. So there were 8 of us standing around this booth, all in matching Flutter t-shirts, trying to explain to everybody, no, we're not really the Flutter team.
Right.
Raph, where's Raph? He was one of them.
We're just the Flutter cheerleaders, basically. So,
oh, man.
I did want to comment that on Danielle's thing that if it's 12 hours long, yes, it's convenient at some point in there, but it's also guaranteed to be inconvenient for somebody about some part of it. 12 hours is a long conference.
Quick thing on the intros, John.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's somebody.
You want that one? Yeah. Yeah, so we do have a little bit that we've done in Flutter. My group in particular helped put some stuff into the Flutter framework to be able to more easily build apps that support multiple screens and large screens. And then there are a few teams in Microsoft that have built some solutions and done some prototyping and starting to see a little bit more adoption of Flutter for apps. Yeah.
Very cool.
Speaking of Flutter apps, there's the big news that came out yesterday or day before. Earth.google.com is now Flutter for web, iOS, and Android.
The UI.
So big announcement on that.
Yeah.
That is huge.
Yeah, the UI. I think there was a little confusion. There's somebody tweeted back like, yeah, but it's probably not the whole thing. Well, yeah, they said right in their tweet that it was the UI is
The UI part of it, yeah.
Yeah, well, what else would it be?
The app is
UI
the
plus
front
the
end.
back
I mean,
right.
It's not. They don't do the back end in Flutter,
Right.
Come
It's
on.
not like they rewrote the whole back end in Flutter, right? I mean,
It doesn't exist that way, right?
Anyway.
People. But I looked at it; it's beautiful, and it does work very slickly on my iOS phone. My brand new iPhone 15 Pro. Ooh, I got it yesterday. Spent 3 hours trying to get it to cross from my old phone. Oh, stuff.
you should just be able to like hold them up to each other. That's what I did with my iPhone.
I got a problem because I have a user ID that's my Apple ID, and I have an older user ID that all of my apps are signed into. And so it got stuck on the window that says, now you need to confirm that you're logging into this other ID, but I can't because the phone's busy doing the transfer. So it was crazy.
Oh man.
Software.
I'll tell you, I am not an Apple fan at all.
Oh well.
I with my
They-
MacBook.
I'll tell
I
you.
love
But
the
it's
MacBook.
pretty good. Yeah.
No, not at all. Not at all. I had to go and get a new Mac Mini because my old one had an i5 and was susceptible. Yep.
Simon points
I,
out
I
YouTube
was just about to touch on that.
Right. Well,
Um,
that's fine. You were in the middle of something else. I thought I'd get that up there real quick. Yes.
But I
Right.
ended up having to get a new
Thanks.
iPad, and because I thought we were going to be developing this app for tablet, and then my iPhone 8 ended up having to go to the retirement home. It could no longer feed itself.
Mhm.
So we wheeled it out of here in a wheelchair, and I went and picked up a 13 because it's just a test device. Anyway, once
My
Is that- my Mac
iPhone
is
8 Plus, yeah, my iPhone 8 Plus was running even in low power mode was only like an hour offline before it died. So it was the battery was definitely
Mhm.
the years.
Yep.
I've set my new one so it only goes to 80%. Apparently that saves your battery by only charging it to 80% all the time.
Marco,
okay.
you should spend a little bit of that big money you're making there, buddy.
Plus, that won't even run like the last
my gosh.
year of iOS releases.
That's like
Jeez.
that's
Well,
like
no, that's
how
running
old?
iOS 8, isn't it? Yeah, that's as far back as we go.
Yeah.
But
but going on that again, going back to Flutter Forward, the
Mhm.
3D with all the little guys running around on there was done on an iPhone 4.
4,
Yes.
I thought okay, but it must have been running iOS 8, I guess.
I don't know. I don't know which version of iOS it was running. I'm just saying that was like one of the best flexes I've seen in a long time.
Wow.
Flutter wise, that's the best flex I've seen in a long time. The other best flex I've seen recently was when the Russian lunar probe, was supposed to land on the moon, crashed, and we sent them a picture of it.
Ow. By bouncing back though to the fact that all of those Google Earth, YouTube Creator Studio, analytics. I'm sorry, not analytics. Oh God,
Ads.
the ads, AdSense. A whole bunch of others also internally at Google are using Flutter. Here's the thing, okay? Is Google going to abandon Flutter? At this point, they could not do so without hanging themselves from a rope. Their internal systems are too dependent on Flutter for them to quit now. So we're safe. We're safe from having Flutter canceled. We're safe from AI replacing us because project managers can't figure out how to actually explain what the hell they want. We're safe.
Yeah.
But
All right.
just since Simon is still not here yet, but he wanted to point out the fact that later this month there's DroidCon London, and there's a Flutter track on it, and he's going to put discount codes in chat later.
Cool.
That says next month. He means this month. That
Yes.
was later corrected.
Is
What I really
late
need
this
them to
month,
put in
yes.
chat is discount airfare codes because
Yeah.
Cleveland to London and
I am
I
so
don't think
happy.
Simon's covering airfare.
I don't have a next flight booked right now. I'm so happy. I've been
Yeah,
so
I
many
know.
places this year. I'm ready to
Lauren
spend a
is
little
so
bit of
happy
time.
that I don't have anything booked right now.
Yeah.
I've got
I
some
mean,
friends
and I'm
in
not,
Canada asking me if I'll come out and speak, but I'm just like, this year.
yeah, no, I'm not complaining. I would do everything I've done this year again. This is not intended to be a complaint at all. But it's just, I already said that, Randall.
I know.
He typed
I'm
it
saying
before you said it.
Simon confirms.
No, that's where I got it from. That he'd updated it to this. But anyway, yeah.
There's the bad guy who said no more international trips this year.
That's not just an avatar made with AI back there. Okay, you never know.
Randall, she will fly to California to smack you.
Yeah, well, California's going to be a long reach since I'm in Oregon.
Yeah,
That's true.
Yeah.
With that.
I have been delaying because we don't have that many questions to answer yet, but
Yeah, we need
I guess
questions.
we should get started here.
We could, yes.
Especially since one of them was asked.
Let's see. Yeah, you doing the
which one you going
I
for?
can read it if you put 'em.
37 minutes ago. We weren't even started back then.
Oh yeah, that was before we started. Yeah. We kind of talked a little bit about that offline with him.
Yeah, I'm using adaptive theme package to implement dark mode, light modes, set the text theme, and scaffold background color for dark theme, light theme. But when I try to toggle, it's not changing the theme, and that always means you're missing the right injection layer above your material app somewhere. So you've got some rebuilds triggering the rebuild of your material app so that it updates its local internal material that everybody's looking at below that.
Right.
That's so interesting because I'm old fashioned. Just use an animation builder. Done.
Yeah.
Or a value notifier, actually.
Value notifier builder is there's the new animation builder.
Yeah, listen.
It's identical code, subclass, doesn't really matter, just has different naming for a parameter.
Yeah.
Nice and simple.
Indeed.
All right. Moving on.
Yeah, take that one out. Next one out.
Which package are we excited to see?
Hacktoberfest.
Well, but the one thing I want to say is I actually had the great pleasure at F3 of introducing Phrase Talk. So
nice.
Really cool.
Thank you for speaking, Frank. Thank you for speaking. Also, next time we do Flutter and Friends, I look forward to seeing you all there. We may even do more fun stuff. Kayaking out is great around Stockholm. Had a good time. Got soaked.
Anyway, if you're not allowed to go international, we should figure out how to do something here in the U.S. so we don't have
we've been talking about. We've had meetings about it. It's a matter of getting people's schedules straightened out.
Yeah,
we were going to try something in September.
And it's not impossible that Invertace will help us out with a conference over here.
Yeah.
They just did an amazing job at F3.
Nice.
So, we all know Majid, but the whole Invertace actually put on that whole thing, and it was amazing. It was well done.
Yep. And there's no shortage of people willing to help, but the problem is this person's got a deadline this week, that one's got a deadline next month, this one's taking family time.
Right. Yep.
So
Yeah.
Yep. So anyway, packages. I'm sorry, projects.
Are we excited to see it?
What's Hacktoberfest? Just because I apparently don't know this.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know either. I've seen references on Twitter, but I don't know what it is.
Well, I haven't from the
it's open. If it's the one that I'm thinking of, it's an open source. This is the 10th year, but it's kind of highlighting open source projects.
Oh, is that the GitHub thing?
Yes.
The GitHub thing. Well, then Mr. Microsoft should be able to answer this question.
It is. Yeah, I just threw the link in there.
You're our token Microsoft guy.
147,000 participants last year.
That's amazing.
Very cool.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
Very cool.
Well,
but it's really it's about spotlighting community efforts and trying to get people to work on open source stuff.
Nice.
Yeah.
I saw something talking about working on the Plus package. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I saw a tweet about inviting people to work on the Plus packages.
Mm-hmm.
So find out.
Yep.
You know what
Yeah,
I
I mean,
want
as
to
far as like, what was the question? The original question was like, which projects
What-
we're excited to see? I
Yeah.
mean,
What
any of them.
product? I think they mean which projects that people might make. Are we
Oh,
excited
yeah,
about?
that people
Or-
might
or-
work on?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
work on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Um,
as we keep saying, in order to participate, what you should be doing is looking at the projects you're using in your project. So anything
Yep.
you're pulling in on PubSpec, take a look at those and see if they have issues that might be interesting for you to solve. That's a great way to get
Yep.
started, is to work on something that is of interest to you. And therefore you're not being completely altruistic, which is fine if you
Yeah.
want to do that too. But I think, solving problems that are also going to help me out is a good way to keep me motivated. So
Yeah, sure.
look for
yeah, if
things
you have a
that are
problem,
broken.
other people have it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you've hit a problem, go fix it and then fix other ones. Yeah.
You
Right.
know,
And also remember, filing an issue counts for Oktoberfest, if I remember. So even that any motion you're making on GitHub is
Interesting.
pushing stuff forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
An interesting
Jasper.
possible project to make. There are
Yeah.
there are all kinds of pubs, taverns, drinking establishments, restaurants, whatever you want to call them. They do beer tours, all different beers from around the world, and Oktoberfest is just a huge, huge time, of course, for beer. Thank you, Deutschland. So an app that tracks all the different beers that you've tried from around the world could be an interesting one, especially if you can find a database that will tell you a big long list of things people should try. And that basically it's Goodreads for beer.
I've got to say, I probably am aware of about 10 apps that already are in that space. So
yes, but are they open source?
As a Portland, Oregonian native, I'm a beer snob. So of course we would look up these kinds of lists and stuff. So I'm pretty sure there's already some apps for that.
And I don't even like beer, but I know there's a potential market for the app. So
I can't drink beer anymore because there's bad carbs. It's carbs. It's horrible. I do zero carb drinks now.
I've never liked beer. It turned out to be a medical thing. I never understood why people liked it. Anyway.
Yeah.
Does i15 Pro throttle a lot?
Hasn't in 24 hours.
Well, here's the thing, though. The throttling actually comes from your carrier.
I think they're talking about the chip actually slows down when it gets too hot. They have deliberate safety measures, and it's been getting hot. I know mine was really hot while I was loading all my previous apps in it. It was hot. It was hot to touch. I tried to pull up the camera. The camera says, "This is too hot to use right now." I'm going, "Really? My phone tells me it's too hot." So it's just, you get those things. The problem is with electrons is when you start them and then stop them, they heat up. And so all these ones changing to zeros and zeros changing to ones actually is what creates heat in your chip. That was a trivia I learned like 30, 40 years ago, something like that. Yeah. It's the starting and stopping of electrons that makes the heat in your chips.
Vibration.
Last Saturday, Apple said they're going to issue a software update that's going to address overheating that's happening because of a combination of bugs in iOS 17, bugs in apps, and a temporary setup period that requires extra processing and therefore heat generation.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
So that was announced Saturday. I saw that headline come across.
That's just make it Windows has a big advantage. Windows and Linux have another big advantage over Apple. Okay, it's called water cooling.
Oh, I can dunk mine in a bucket.
Yeah,
that would.
If it starts to overheat, just put your phone in a glass of water.
There you go.
That's right. Let me get my glass of water out here. All right.
I'm sure it would survive it just fine. Although if it's like a Pixel 7, as soon as you dunk it, it comes up and tells you there's water in the USB port. Don't plug anything in.
There. I need an app that is on my phone that tells me what the internal temperature is. There's got to be an API for that. Oh, if only I knew how to make apps for iOS. Huh. How would I possibly know? I've got to learn Swift. Now that's it. It's finally down to it. I've got to learn Swift.
Well, you might have to.
By the way, bouncing back to that whole theme thing,
Yes,
Material app does have a dark theme parameter.
but not the
Yes.
switch. You have to set the switch at that level, though. So you have to have
Mhm.
something above it that's setting the switch
Updates
there.
it on the
Yeah,
when you're through the pages.
yeah.
You
So
know, I had
you can put a light theme and a dark theme
Mhm.
as constants, but you have to have something that changes the switch for you.
Yep.
you know, we ran into something. We're using a theme extension with all of our custom colors and such listed out. We made parameter names that we want for our own widgets. Well, one
Mhm.
of them is the scaffold background color, right? The thing is we have to set the scaffold background color from the theme extension instantiation file.
Mhm.
But you can't set the scaffold background color from that file because it's in the list of theme extensions. Right? So you have to put it in there before you can access it in the context.
Mhm.
So of course, what we end up doing is in the next screen adding a theme widget and then changing the scaffold color there and then moving on. So
Mhm.
just a thought. It was an interesting twist.
Oh, there's a comment on breweries. Open
There we
brewery
go.
DB. .dev. There's your solution. Now just need
Yeah,
a
but wait a
UI from
minute.
there.
Wait a minute. John shouldn't be answering that question. He should be answering the iOS question.
Yeah, right, exactly.
You know, no matter how many times John tries to switch to Flutter, the iOS world sucks him back in like a black hole.
So sad. So sad.
Just kind of
I like
speaking of
my
that,
portable
one of the interesting things that's happening is Matt Carroll is working on just basically cloning Swift UI in Flutter just
Yeah.
to shut up all the people who are talking about how much better it is to just basically subsume it into and create a package for that. So I'm watching that with some anticipation. I wish I had time to help contribute, but and hey Noel.
I was just going to tap on that.
Yeah, and here we've got Flutter London is posting. That's probably Simon again.
Yep.
Posting a shout out to the
Simon or
community.
George.
Next
Yeah.
Flutter London event is a warm up for DroidCon. So if you're in the London
Yep.
area, the greater London area, I guess, would probably include Salisbury Plains for Stonehenge, right?
By the way, whether it's Simon or
Always.
George doesn't really matter. If it's where is this now? Is it still at CodeNode or where is Flutter London located these days? And hi, Noel.
Greetings.
Noel is a very long time Flutter community member, Flutterista, Women Tech Maker, GDG organizer, Mickey Mouse Club member. Okay, let's see here. Flutter was using Skia. Now it's changed to two different rendering engines. Talking about Metal and Vulkan. What are the reasons? Is there any improvement in performance? For the last one, oh yeah. Improvements in performance. Yes.
Cool.
And just real quick, we'll get back to that other one. It's George saying that it will be hosted by NTT Data near Old Street, Silicon Roundabout. Okay. I missed the old location because it had a bar in the middle of all the presentation rooms. It was really cool. You know what? I went over there. The way we do it in the US is you go, you have pizza and Coca-Cola or Pepsi at the meeting, and then some people wander out to a bar afterwards and have a beer. I like the British way better. There is a bar in the middle of all the different meetup rooms. So you go and get your beer and then you carry your beer into the talk.
Flutter Atlanta is a combination. We have beer there at the meeting, and then we go to a bar after.
Okay. So, by the way, pre-congratulations to Noel.
Cool.
That's
now,
awesome.
Bouncing back.
Going back on the Skia part, though, like Simon's pointing out, Skia is moving over to Impeller.
Yep.
Right.
That's actually the big engine rendering engine news. Yeah, that's the
Yep.
Yeah.
That's going to be, it's Impeller, and looking also at Vulkan. Vulkan has been a step up from most rendering engines, at least in the Windows world. I believe also in Linux. But yeah, Impeller is going to definitely be the thing to look at for iOS. And it's all about performance. Let's face it.
Yep.
We may write Flutter one time, but these are still very different physical devices. They have different hardware. What runs great on one may not run great on the other. And so, yeah, they're trying to keep things going well. So let's see here. Will Impeller support Windows Desktop? Hey, Simon.
I figured we'd. I figured we'd ask the Microsoft guy.
Exactly.
I don't know that they're going to bring that over to Windows or not. Or if it's going to be, what we have today is just going to continue to exist.
Check the repo, see where the commits are going.
Yep.
That's our own.
If they need to, I'm sure they will.
There is nothing hidden.
Yeah.
All you have to do is go dig through the source code on master, and you'll see what's coming up.
And the key word there in Simon's reply is eventually.
Yeah.
That would be what I would have thought. Yeah, for sure.
Every day. I review all the commits of all the key repos every day just to see what's going on. Yeah.
I wish I had
and that's why you're DD and I'm not, I guess.
I was able to update the most recent Flutter release 57 seconds after it was announced. Because I saw
lucky. Just hit the button
Did
at
I
the
ever
right
tell
time.
the old story here? I don't know if I ever told it on the show, but there was a day way back when that we only had the Gitter. Which Gitter is the single-threaded monstrosity chat room that every repo gets that no one ever uses. And the only thing that there was for Flutter, I mean, there was no Stack Overflow, there was no Google Group, there was no Slack, there was no Medium, there was nothing.
It's just us and Gitter.
That's it. And the fact is that we hit a point where we snapped mentally and said, we're not doing this anymore. We're going to actually have nice things. So we started forming Slacks and Mediums, etc. But bouncing back to the day when there was only Gitter, I don't know what ever possessed me to do this, but instead of just pulling, I ended up downloading a new zip file. I didn't even clone. I downloaded a zip file of the repo. So then I open it up I downloaded on Friday. I get distracted. So then I go and I take my nice new zip file, and these are the days where we only had master. There was no other branch. So we sit down and I install this thing and I run Flutter Doctor, and it says I'm 57 commits behind master. So I go on to Gitter and I'm like, I just installed 2 minutes ago and I'm already 57 commits behind master. Don't you people have anything better to do on a Sunday morning? And it took Remy about 10 seconds to answer no.
Yeah. 24/7 it gets commits. It's the one repo that's always at the top of my list. I have them sorted by most recent commit of about 30 repos that I watch. And it's always right there at the top. SDK and Flutter and Flutter packages all get commits pretty much 24/7.
Yeah, it's busy. Yep. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that the list of people who are allowed to actually land a PR in Flutter does include a very, very few non-Googlers, but there are a few, and they are in parts of the world where you might see commits landed or PRs landed in the middle of the night in the US. So, but anyway, and John says, no, I'm sorry, John writes.
There was just the question of using Impeller. And I think just to clarify, right, it's the engine under the hood that is used to render. Today, that engine is Skia. Eventually, all the platforms will move to Impeller one by one or as it's ready. And that doesn't mean we have to do anything different. It's just
this is going to be really interesting, actually, because if you know the history of how all this started with the Sky engine, or with Sky, I'm sorry, the Sky project. If I remember it correctly, it was Hixie and Eric on their 20% time. They were working on Chrome. And the way Eric described it on the Software Engineering Daily podcast, you can go look up Eric Seidel, Software Engineering Daily, and it's a really cool listen. But Hixie and Eric were basically playing around with the engine because in Chrome they have thousands and thousands of checks that they have to make sure of before they render a web page or it will crash. Going all the way back to Adam Barth as well.
Adam too, yeah.
Yep. So in short, these checks, I mean, there's an Israeli banking site from the 90s that you have to run a check for. And Eric said it's death by 1,000 cuts because the engine was so bogged down in all these checks that it was taking forever. And they were wondering what would happen if you got rid of all these checks, fed it only known good data, and then let it go and to see what it could do. Well, it turned out it was a fire-breathing dragon. And they took it up to management and said, I think we got something. So management agreed and told him to run with it. And next thing you know, it's called Sky. And August 6th of 2017, Sky became Flutter. And we all never looked back. But one of the things I just want to say on that is that was the engine that we have now, which is Skia. So if it was that good as Skia, how good is it going to be when we have Impeller on all the other platforms too? So
I was going to say, Philip actually mentioned some of that story during his talk, and when the talks come out from F3, definitely watch his because it was a great. It was about mad science, and it was about not necessarily doing things that are practical, but doing things to see, that you try out and see what's going on. And he mentioned how they ripped out everything out of the browser, and it worked really well. And that wasn't practical because that's not something you could do for the web back then. You couldn't just rip it all out, but it led to that. That's what led to Flutter, which led to the apps, which things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad idea actually to take a section of something out of its own system and see if you can run it in a different way for a different purpose, because this sure paid off.
Yeah, my talk had the misfortune of I was right after Roman, who's a great speaker, and I was right before Philip, who's a great speaker, and so I was the one in the middle, and I'm like, come on, I'm going to do a good job, but there's no way I compare well, to those two.
I was the second talk at Flutter and Friends, and it was mostly single track, but there were some points when it was 2 tracks. But it was single track at the time. I was the second talk, and I had to come after Felix.
It's
Felix Angela. So
if you have a question, good time to get it in. So
yes.
We're just waiting for more questions at this point. We're discussing. We're being nostalgic. That's Flutter's been around long enough that we can be nostalgic now. Which
it has. We've been doing this for
years.
5 years,
5 plus almost 6 years.
In fact,
I'm only a little over 4.5. And if we're being nostalgic, I mean, I got to meet George at IO19, so that was neat. But it'd be neat to see him again.
Oh my God, it's 6 years this month. It was 6 years last month for me and Simon and Nash.
Yeah.
because the first commit was August 6th, 2017. Simon, myself, and Nash. Simon, myself, and Nash came on in September 2017. And then I remember, I think it was October 2017, there was this other person starting to answer questions. I'm like, who the heck is this new guy named Remy? So, yeah. I need to do
everybody there. Everybody that was there in Prague, all the Invertase people were always looking super frazzled. They're running around, stuff like that. And then I would see Remy just sitting there working, sitting there on his computer, his laptop just working.
The fastest I've ever seen fingers fly is Simon 10 minutes before a talk.
Oh, yes. Still writing it,
I
of
was
course.
joking with him that you're not a real speaker until you're desperately trying to finish the slides in the Uber on the way to the event. So then DroidCon 18, our talk is coming up. We're doing a dual speaker talk. It's coming up in like 10 minutes, and he had this brilliant idea to change the demo code to something else he wanted more. And he's like,
Yep, I've done the same thing.
The best one, though, the very best one was in that same week. We did a talk at Flutter London on a different subject, and his slides really were not done. He wasn't changing something. he just wasn't done. And so he's sitting there in CodeNode out at the bar, typing like crazy. And the way that the rooms are that the talks are in, the back wall is a window out to the hallway. So I'm in the hallway, and Raf, it was Raf. He's standing at the front of the podium looking at the audience towards me, and I'm at the back window going, slow down, because Simon's still typing. And he needed more time.
Wow.
It was one of those things where you just had to be there.
But if we're kind of in the chat, we're kind of keep carrying on a little bit of a conversation about what practically does moving to Impeller mean. And Matt just kind of asked, this is a chat question, so it didn't need a queue, but since we don't have a lot of queue questions here, I just figured I'd bring it up. And he's asking, does Impeller open up any new possibilities? And the answer to that is an emphatic yes, because it means that you can code things that need more performance that you wouldn't have been able to get your frames per second out of from before. So I would say the answer to that is an emphatic yes, it does, but it's that level of what you get. It's not like we get more functionality, but we can do more with it, which means that we've got a good shot at being able to write more 3D stuff or whatever, because we can rely on it actually being able to render it fast enough.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because we were already at the point where what we were doing with it was running at 60 FPS. So now we can do more intense things.
So,
which means Simon's going to be writing more 3D code for his game.
Cool.
Well, I know he actually told me over the week or last week that he's waiting for that actually. Because or actually maybe I think it was on Humpday last week when we did that someone asked what that's like a project, but he's waiting. So he didn't tell me; he told everybody that.
Right.
Yeah, it's I mean, I think it's going to be some neat stuff coming up with that as we can do more and more with it. And I'm old enough to remember playing with my Atari 2600, and it could handle I think it was 4 sprites on the screen at a time.
Yeah.
And out came the Pac-Man game, which has 4 ghosts plus you, so it needs 5.
Right.
And that was so that was an impossible thing to do. And the people that wrote it figured out a way to time slice it so that you could show more sprites than just the 4. And I mean, just seeing that necessity coming out, and the more time that goes by, I think the more things that might be impossible in Flutter, we're gonna find people that learn how to solve it. And that's gonna be pretty cool.
We did that. That's a really interesting point about how they did that, because I learned a similar technique for communications in the service. They called it time division multiplexing, which is basically you take one, in this case, like one frame and draw one thing, but then you draw something different on the next frame. Right, Danielle? And then that way you can now double the number of sprites you do. You just never do 4 on, or more than 4 on any given frame. So
Yeah, and it's figuring out that would work is it's just really smart people, you know.
Yeah.
I mean that's how you you know, can do certain things with LEDs even, you know, electronics too.
In the descriptions of the 2600 operations, I remember understanding why the chess game, when it was working out a move, just went to a solid color for a while. It was flashing different solid colors. And it's because the only computation time you would get on a normal game is during the vertical blanking interval, when essentially the writing head of the screen has to go from the bottom of the screen back to the top. There's a little tiny bit of window right in there that every CRT has. And that is the entire time that the chip isn't tied up doing its calculations, because it's in order to put all those dots on the screen, it's constantly busy writing those bits. And so what it would do is it would just write one bit, and then it would compute the entire frame without changing the one color bit. So that's why it had to be a full screen of the same color over and over again. And I went, wow, that's some clever stuff.
It really is. Necessity there is the
yeah. And when you think of how small of a window the refresh interval is too, that all of the cool things you saw in all the video games in the 2600 and later the 5200 and stuff, it's all in that vertical retrace interval that that all the computations are happening. Yeah.
It makes me wonder how many people even know what we're talking about. I mean, how many people would understand the term trash 80?
Me.
I mean, people have heard of Radio Shack, if you want to get down to it.
Oh, come on. We had a Radio Shack up until about 4 months ago. I was down there. And as a former electronics tech in the service, the ability to run out to the store and pick up potentiometers, resistors, capacitors, you know. In fact, we used to do, I shouldn't even say it, but we used to take DC power supplies and, or I'm sorry, we used to take power supplies, grab a loose capacitor, put the leads across something, charge it up, and then throw it at people. They grab it and a little zap.
And it's where they ask your phone number when you bought a battery. That was just weird. Yeah. Can I have your phone number for a battery? Yeah. No, you may not have my phone number for a battery. Well, you know, it's asking for it on the computer. Well,
the battery of the month club, though. Remember that?
Battery of the month club. We have your card. You took it down. You got the one battery. A battery.
Oh man. All right. Let's see here.
And James, I was going to say to James, yes, I've told this story a few times, but my first computer for Christmas, I asked for everybody to give me money, and you know exactly which one I'm talking about. I asked everybody to give me money, and I took that plus my life savings. I was 12, 13, whatever, and I went and bought a VIC-20 with a tape drive, with a cassette drive. I had a friend that had an Atari 400, I think, that had a cassette drive. And what they did that was really cool with their cassette drive was they only used one of the stereo channels, and the other stereo channel could actually play sound. And so they actually had soundtracks to games that they would control when it started and stopped. You know, because they couldn't even rewind. They could control when it started and stopped. But you had, for parts of the game, you would have an actual soundtrack that they could play through that part of the cassette.
Oh, those are the days. We do have a legitimate question here that I can answer.
I don't really remember cassette tapes so much, but I hate to say it, I used to work with paper tape, reading. It was like a punch card, but on a roll.
Yeah, my first job was at the computer center at OU, and we had to boot that machine with paper tape. But like my third job or so was an even older PDP that we had to boot with toggle switches.
Oh yeah, and I had an IMSI 8080 or IMSI 8080, right? IMSI 8080 that there was a 22-step bootstrap toggle that I had memorized. C3, D2, A1, C1, like that. So it's like bing, 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 and that was just enough to get it to where it could read from some RAM or some storage of some kind. No ROM in it at all, so it was all RAM. And then I had to run stuff in. There's a question actually in the chat room that I can answer. So let's
Yes,
do this.
go right ahead for that. I was
Right.
going to ask about that because I didn't quite
Dart-
understand it.
Darts has the either return type with left and right for failure and success. Have I used this in production code? Yes. However, I will say strongly, Darts is dead. It has been abandoned by it was an original proof of concept. It was really clever in some of the ways that it did functional programming, but the real game winner here is FP Dart. Sandro has been doing an amazing amount of making sure every single method call in the public API is documented, making sure it's well tested, and making sure that there are tons of tutorials so you can go 0 time with functional programming all the way up to really understanding how to work with it with Dart. So let me explain why functional programming so that we can motivate it too, is that when you have like a return value from some API call, you typically, when it breaks, you typically throw an exception. But the problem is that exceptions happen out of band and they're a lot harder to manage, a lot harder to test and get everything to work right. So what functional programming does is essentially creating a dual value that it can either have in, it's called either, and it can either have a left or a right. The left is typically an error message of some kind, a subclass of exception, and the right is your real value. Well, the thing is, you can hand that around in strongly typed variables and store it in strongly typed variables and strongly typed parameters, and it can be either in one or the other of those modes. So that means you can record and pass around that this thing failed when I tried to go get it. But yeah, let me tell you, this is how it failed. So it makes it a much stronger way to have well-known pathways with your data. The big thing about functional programming is then, I'm going to say the word monad and I'll freak out about half of the people listening. But basically, there's a way of taking one either and then doing something only if it's a right. Only, in other words, only if it actually has a value, and then doing the next thing only if it has a right. And that way, the first left in that chain stops the chain automatically. And that cascading of one to the next is one of the fundamental things in functional programming. Anyway, FP Dart's been around for a while, just had a new release that really embraced Dart 3. I definitely highly recommend checking out FP Dart is the place to go for all that.
Nice. You know, I had almost forgotten about monads, and I'm going to blame Randall for my unforgetting. I used to say that inherited widget was Flutter's monad. Either you understood it or you didn't. Some people figured it out very quickly. Other people just could not wrap their head around the way that it worked. And after 5 years, I still can't. So it's a monad to me, but that's okay because we have lots of other ways to do things. And, you know, if worst comes to worst and I don't have any packages that I can use in a situation, there is always ancestor state of type. So
I like that. Simon said in the chat, simple way to, well, I can push this up, can't I?
Yeah.
I have the power. Yeah. Monad has a map method, yeah, and not the map that normally is in a Dart, unfortunately, but a map as in take an object of this metatype and turn it into another object of this metatype, having an operation that's performing on the good data that's inside, if there's good data. So that's kind of the job there. Yeah.
I am getting pinged about a meeting here that I really need to get to. We thought Simon was going to be here by now.
All right. Well,
let's go for one more question here.
Okay, I can take.
Is there any noticeable performance difference increasing the components XY on Flutter blur hash? Larger scale looks better. I have not messed with it.
I love the package, but I haven't had my use case for it yet either.
Yeah, same.
I absolutely love it. I mean, we had our last Flutter meetup here in Atlanta. It was about packages and which packages you like. And at the end, I brought this one up as one I really like, but I don't know the answer to the question.
Performance difference. I mean, it's all back end, right? I mean, your
Yeah.
back end is where you're creating the hash and you're just passing those strings across for the URL. So I wouldn't think performance would be a difference, but large scale looks better. Well, that's probably just a factor of the hash and what it has to work with. I mean,
Right.
Okay, now apparently I have 2 meetings. If you can hear this,
Wow.
I'll be
Wow.
right
Well, Scott says he's got 5 minutes before he's in, so we'll just have to deal with it without him
Well,
being there.
it was good seeing you, Scott.
Yeah.
Nice having
Bye,
you on
Scott.
the show once again. So we don't have any questions in the queue at this point, I don't believe. Let's see. Yeah, well, there's this question. Are we answering this yet? Do we know anything about?
I think we're consensus is we don't really know. I mean, I'm not sure what exactly increasing components is, because I don't think that's just the size of the image. So I'm not sure.
Maybe it's this.
I don't know that.
Well, that's
image.
yeah. So I mean, I know what the blur hash the package does, but
Yeah.
I don't know why there would be a noticeable performance difference because you're just loading the image. Yes, larger image, you
leader says
take longer.
Careful on blur hashes that are too big.
Okay, Simon,
so what
great.
Is big and why is careful, and how do you be careful?
Yeah.
I only type this very slowly when I'm entering the code. I'm very careful.
Yeah, I mean, if you're using a blur hash, in theory, you should kind of know what the size is your image is going to be, so that you can have it, the placeholder there working. Because the whole point of having a placeholder is so that your page isn't jumping all over places with, changing when you get the picture in. And so, yeah. So I mean, if we're talking about actual size of the image, you should be pretty close to where you are. And 30 bytes is like 30 bytes. I mean, but I don't know exactly what we're talking about doing there with that.
Yeah, me neither. Well, okay, so we have no questions in the queue. If you type your question in right now, you will get a live first look at your question. So,
Exactly.
And in the meantime, let's see what else is happening in the Flutter world. So we've had like 6 or 7 new 10.13 releases, right? So we've had a few 3.13. Yeah, we've had a few. Let's see. I bet there's a command I can type for that. Jasper has been moving forward. We covered Jasper about 6 or 7 or 8 weeks ago. And it has been interesting. I'm actually working with it and working with the guy who came on the show, who's like leading the effort. 3.13.6 already. Yeah, so we've had quite a few releases of 3.13.
By the way, something that Kevin Chisholm told me recently that I did not know from before. Did you realize that now we're getting these weekly? That there's a window on Wednesdays to release those.
Wow.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
See?
We should check right now, just in case there's a new.
So
okay.
There will be one.
No. Oh, you're right. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
The 8th. Yeah, there was one they snuck one in between. Had to do a quick update of.
If it's important enough, they'll do it. But they're trying to.
Yeah, but otherwise, it is weekly.
The window. Yeah.
Huh.
Use Puro. Use Puro to keep those up to date. That way you can have your old apps on your old releases and not have to migrate them immediately.
That means we should have a .7 sometime today.
Oh, yeah, maybe. We'll be watching for it. Oh, we have a question. All right, let's see here.
We have a question. What are those?
Amazing. App Flowy.
Flutter open source Notion alternative. App Flowy.
In Notion, I've been forced to use a couple of times, but I don't remember all the details. Is it just
Flowy.io?
It's like Google Docs. Is that what Notion is?
Mm-hmm.
You
I'm just sitting here being quiet, hoping y'all know.
I don't.
No, I'm looking at their page right now.
Well, I wholeheartedly approve the use of using Flutter with it.
Yep, there we go.
That's my hot take. Is go Flutter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's
Simon,
project management, right? So
save us. He probably knows the answer to this one too.
Ah,
but I think what he's saying that it's written in Flutter. AppFlow is a
Yeah, that's what I'm
Flutter.
thinking too. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. And my hot take is I support that.
Yep.
mhm.
Do all your project management with it. Yep.
And
Hey,
here's
George
Manage
this.
your Flutter
George
projects
is,
for the Flutter
George
project.
George-
We don't.
And it has
do we
dark mode. So
know about a Google event? Is there a Google event today? I don't know of any.
not.
Is it
Thanks
a
a lot,
Flutter?
Randall.
I know the Google team is kind of all together right now, but I don't know of any special event.
Yeah, I don't know. And then there's this question. We can do this one. What is your pub dev package of the week? I would say Jasper is starting to get a lot of my interest. So I've been working with that. The other one is Flex Color Scheme. If you don't know about it yet, if you're working with colors, especially all the new colors in Material 3, Flex Color Scheme is really an amazingly mature and comprehensive package for figuring out how to get colors into all the slots that you have that
Shout
make
out to
sense,
Mike.
architected and stuff. And it's third party, but he's doing a really great job with that. So there was a talk on it. I found out about it because of the talk that was at Vikings? No, not Vikings. Most recent thing. What was the most? Not F3, the thing before.
F3 or Friends or
Friends.
Friends, probably.
Okay.
Yeah, one of those. And one of those recent ones. I remember seeing this thing and I went, oh yeah, well that solves my very lack of design skills, doesn't it? I can pick two colors or that I can, and then it just kind of blends everything else out and works around even some bugs in Material 3. That's cool. So nice stuff.
I didn't see Mike in the chat today. Sometimes he hangs out. And
yeah, Flex Color Scheme, I think is the name, right?
Yep.
Okay, let me get the URL for that for the chat here.
So George said made by Google is the event.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So,
And I have been trying to hold out for Simon, but unfortunately I'm a little late already. Simon, hurry up.
anyway, we'll hold the fort down if you have to go.
Appreciate it. Good seeing you all again.
Thanks, Scott.
Good to see
But
you.
yeah, now I need to let a manager know that I can finally meet him.
Cool. And so do either of you have a favorite pub
package
when you want to promote that maybe gets enough promotion?
Last time I was asked that question, I threw out Blur Hash, which has already been mentioned today. He talked about it. So.
Nice. So you beat the crowd already on this one. That's great.
I didn't bring it up this time though, but that was like, yeah. You know what? I got to watch some of the what's the one with creating your slides with Flutter that I saw that Maker does. His package, and I got to see some stuff done with that at F3. So I would probably say that if you're needing to make a presentation, I think it'd be pretty cool.
Slide thing? Flutter slides package now? Again?
Maybe Flutter slides. I'm trying to look here. I'm looking real quick on this, but maybe it's I think he actually his hackathon did something on that. So
slide deck.
Somebody's saying
slide deck or slide deck.
I think it's slide deck. Yeah, let's see though.
Slide deck. And then there's a question for me. I see that. Well,
Flutter deck. Flutter deck.
Flutter deck.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. And I can look that up and paste that in the.
I'll paste it in. I can paste it in. I have special.
Do you have power? Do you have power?
I believe I do. We're gonna find out right now.
We'll see. If I don't see it, I'll know.
No, I think she does. I think they do show up.
Look at that. Oh, right, because you're in the blue. You're one of the blue people. That's right.
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, and that's so yeah, check that out. And I will go ahead and answer the next question because it is for me. It's even been flagged for me. So Riverpod async notifier. A Riverpod question. I like Riverpod questions. Those are fun. Does not check the equality like notifier. Notifier also only uses identity, by the way. So I don't know what that statement is actually accurate or not. I have to use select for using the widget build. Okay, so if your state does not have a workable double equals override, then you need to add the double equals override. That's pretty much it. Or I don't recommend this, but you can override update should notify in your notifier or your notifier subclass. And in that, you can say, given this old state and given that new state, should it be an emit or not? But then you get these weird things when you start doing dot select on those, because then it's a derived value and you get different things. And yeah, really the best thing to do is to make sure your state has a valid override or a working double equals one way or the other. So that's probably the answer to that, I would think. If that's not the full answer, ask me again. We've got plenty of room for getting further responses to that. So we'll just go with that.
But isn't checking equality using the equal? I mean, so does it not check that?
Well, that's the thing, though. By default, notifier is using identity, not equality. So you have to get, no, wait, that can't be right. Ooh. No, is it using identity? It's using equality.
Yeah, I mean, if overriding equal does it, then it's using equality. Has to be.
Yeah.
He followed it up with a question.
I got it backwards then. Okay. Let's see. I have to set it with async data. Why is different for checking equality? Well, of course, you have to use async data if you're doing an async notifier. Yes, and that would be a different async data entity. It'd be a different object. Every time you say async data on foo, you get a different object,
right?
Because it has to construct a new object. So that's always safe. So you're saying that notifier is different, right? Because notifier is doing equality, but maybe your class doesn't have a good equality method. And that would be the reason why it's not doing it. Yeah, it has to be based on equality. No, I remember someplace that it's identity. It's equality for family keys, but it's identity for state updates. That was the thing. I see some motion backstage. Backstage. Who could it be? Who could it be now? Who could it be? I don't know yet. Could it be? Could it be?
Hey.
How's everyone?
He's
Rescue us.
Blimey. Yeah, there's strikes on. There's strikes on today, so like no trains. So I'm in the middle of a taxis and literally just a row of traffic all the way home. Stop start. So lucky me. So.
Oh, and there's two questions pop up instantly now that Simon's here. What did you people just hold those questions just going, well, we don't want an answer from these four dudes.
Yeah.
We want the answer just from Simon. So we're going to hold our question until we see Simon's lovely face.
You were talking about like the blur hashes when I disconnected.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, just to brief on that point, there's actually some really nice you can actually go find them online. If you go look for wait, hang a minute. What's the painting?
Painting.
Where it's not sure if it's a man or a woman or whatever it is. Like it's like a really old painting. Monet. Yeah,
Monet.
Or something like that. Anyway. So the Monet, there's actually someone that's did a scientific paper on overlapping polygons to reproduce the Monet, right? And they're all can you reproduce a really high quality painting? What is the least amount of polygons and what colors and transparencies should they be to do this? That's kind of like the same similar sort of algorithmic sort of problem that you get with blur hashes, right? Because the idea is that you're picking X, Y coordinates on a grid. That's why the grid makes a difference when you say like 40 by 80 or whatever in a blur hash. And then what color should they start in, what should they end in, and what should be the intensity, right? And all those sort of factors overlapping all these gradients gives you the final sort of blurry picture look. And the idea is rather than transmitting the RGB value for every pixel of an image of a blurry picture, you transmit the coordinates and the geometry and the sort of intensity of these colors, and then the computer replays that as a blurry picture whilst you're downloading. And the blur hash that can represent all that information is like 32 bytes, 128 bytes, you know, very small amount of data to transmit compared to an image, which even a blurry image at the lowest quality of JPEG is still going to be like 4K, 10K, right? So it means that you can inline the blur hash into your JSON files or your JSON structures in your Firebase documents. And it means that you can deliver really fast scrolling behaviors because, you know, you've instantly got the data. You don't have to go to the network to download something. And when the user stops scrolling, then you go to the network and start downloading the images. And it all looks, and you just fade between them and it all looks quite nice. That's if people were wondering what blur hash is up. But again, if you put too much data in a blur hash, you end up with a 5K, you know, 10K, you know, hash, which defeats the purpose of it in the first place. And not only that, it now has to, the same problem with vector graphics. If you have a really complex vector graphic, it has to do a lot of rendering to get to that point. Well, that is a problem in terms of if you have lots of blur hashes that are really complicated. It's a lot more intense for the CPU to handle. But equally, it's a lot more it's even more intense to compute, to work out where these gradients should be and how they should overlap to produce the end result. So anyway, I digress. But anyway, that was what I was talking about when it turns to long blur hashes. You want to be careful. You don't make them too big. For what purpose, right? The temporary as well. That's the whole idea is I'm going to be really short, temporary things. Having a really good blur hash defeats the purpose of having a blur hash, right?
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to get at. Sorry, I kind of digressed there, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I think the 30 byte size is pretty good. You know.
Okay. And we have a couple questions, so we can go ahead and get started on those. Where's the first one here? It got moved away. There we go. Let's try this. When should we rethrow, and what's a suitable place layer to catch exceptions in terms of DDD, TDD? I have been told, and I've been using this, that you don't let exceptions pass through a layer. You should change it into some data value before it gets returned to the next layer, whatever that means in terms of your architecture. But
I do like that. I don't necessarily agree with that concept, but I do understand the principles. The problem here is understanding. So there's a nice thing I like. It's a thing I like and hate about Java, and that is if you want to throw an exception, you have to state it throws this exception.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
The caller can then go, oh, I need to handle this exception, even if it's like rethrowing it or passing it along. You would know that, and you're up front. At the moment, any function can throw an exception. And any async function can throw an exception, which means that it's not very clear. So the point about the layering system is if you say, okay, I'm throwing in, don't ever throw in this layer, which just produces a sort of an error result, then you're dealing with that error result. That's where the either stuff comes in. However, it can be advantageous to like deal with exceptions on your own terms. So you wrap exceptions in your own exception object, my app exception, and then app exception is what you capture at your higher level, knowing that it's ever going to be that exception, right? And then you can kind of have the same similar principles that way, or something similar.
The problem is you always need to have a sentinel of some kind that is distinct from every possible valid value.
Yeah.
And you can do that by using abstract data types and inventing, good value, bad value as being your subclasses of it, and then returning one or the other. That way it still fits in the parent class's slot. And that's essentially what either is doing in FP Dart, as we were mentioning earlier, but and you alluded to that as well. But you do end up creating these custom classes anyway, because either never covers the whole thing. It's usually you want to kind of know, well, what kind of an exception was it? Well, you can carry that in the left of either, but it's sometimes clearer in terms of like really dispatching it through the rest of your app to have a master class and a bunch of subclasses that reflect the status based on different operations, like maybe logged in, logged out, erroneous password, and so on. And that could be a meta state that you could then have as your return value to go up to the next layer that could then dispatch on that.
And I would point out, kind of going along with the whole Java thing and stuff like that, that you probably should be Dart doc defining your functions and methods and stuff. And if you do that, you should probably put in there that what it throws, just so that the people looking at it can tell what they need to be prepared for. And as far as when to, throw, rethrow kind of thing, once you rethrow and stuff like that, is that also to me depends upon, how would you expect this to be kind of handled? Is it more of an async? So we throw something and it's handled, or is it like, for example, if I'm making an API call, okay, and I get back an exception because it threw a 400 or whatever, and I end up getting back an exception for that. Well, it may very well be that that's a fairly normal thing to come back, and I want to return back, like Randall was saying, I want to return back, hey, it failed this way, but it's a normal thing coming back. It's not out of band at all. But if I need to, stop something or handle that, then I would end up throwing either rethrowing or throwing a new exception, or letting it go by or whatever at that point, because it needs to be handled in this more async kind of, pull me out of the loop, do exception kind of things at that point. And so, it's not always easy to know how you expect this error to be handled outside of you. But you're at the very least you're providing some sort of guidance even at that point with by how you deal with it. Whether you think this is a normal thing, because we've talked about this in the past. Sometimes you can have an error, but it's like a normal completion, and there's other times we have an error. It's an error. It's whatever. And so to me that affects greatly whether or not I rethrow something, or whether I handle it and return something that just says, hey, this didn't work the way you wanted it to. It worked, but it didn't work. It didn't do what you wanted.
Yeah.
And the most important thing about exceptions is don't catch anything you're not prepared to fix.
Yeah.
Let it ripple up. If you can't do something at the level that you're at to somehow placate it, fix it, mitigate it somehow, don't even catch it. Don't even put a try catch around your code if there's nothing sensible you could do with anything that blows up in it. Let that go ahead and throw up, because if that gets up to the highest level, that gets up to your red screen, somebody needs to fix something that's deep down below your code.
There's definitely a bad code smell when you have try catches without an exception type. That especially that don't rethrow. So it's fine to do like a try catch everything and then like log it or whatever you need to do and then rethrow it, right? But too many times you can catch, ignore it, and then either the UI state is left in inconsistent state, or the app state in general, or it doesn't get reported to your crash system. And if you don't report things to your crash system, you don't know they went wrong. And you've got users complaining about a function, but for you it works fine when you use it, but for these particular users it doesn't. Those are situations which you don't ever want to be in, because they're just really impossible to find. The something to cover just briefly, because I've mentioned this before, but we talk about errors. So exceptions throw errors. Like you have error and stack trace. Strictly speaking, error and exception are two separate different concepts in Dart. So an error is something that is unrecoverable. That is something that is like indexed error, right? Like a range error. These are things that what happens when we try and access the program itself tries to access something that's no longer that's out of range of an array or something, of a list. That is something you should never do. That is a programming error. That is an error that should throw down the stack, as it were, and then eventually be caught by your error capturing and report it back to your backend system. It should crash the app. Right, that is something that just shouldn't be fixed. Right, shouldn't be caught as an exception. Mm-hmm. So a good example of this is I'll give an example of where you can actually use errors in your own code. If you have, let's say, a enum, and you do a switch name on your enum to do some processing, and you're only ever in this function, you're only ever given 2 of maybe 3 different or 4 different possible options of an enum. But in the switch statement, you want to make sure that you're handling all 4 instances, right? You also have an incomplete switch statement if you're not handling all the 4 different enums. So you might do case statements for 2, and then you have a default case which does throw state error, right? State error, should not have received this, should not have got here, right? Not implemented, unsupported error. That's another one that can be used, right? And these are things to say that this should never have happened. So at some point when you're programming, if you ever get that, you're like, oh, I need to implement that thing, right? I need to make it do that thing later. Same.
An error should always be that the programmer screwed up somehow.
Yeah.
Not that
Whereas
something happened that was expected.
An exception is more of a runtime issue, right? Like the network failed, you've stopped being able to read from disk, or some sort of like external thing to the application has failed. That's or there's some processes within inside your application that you throw an exception for, so you can handle that exception as an error, and then again we say error, but handle that exception and recover from it.
I was going to say, one thing I've run across recently with that, though, also is with the work I was doing on testing for being able to reset for tests and on an integration test. So I'm running my main, and my main was reassigning Flutter on error, to handle when that, if anything does slip through, and if that doesn't get quite reset right. So I had to add code in that says that if I'm running my this test level, I'm passing a Boolean into my main that says don't run this.
Yeah, I actually have so when we run integration tests on a couple of projects, we pass in a Dart define called integration test true, I think it is, or something like that, just to say then we can have a constant flag within the application that looks for, see, am I running an integration test? And then it literally just disables the piece of code that sets the on error handler, so that the errors don't trickle up and then they don't get sent to you don't want to send them to Crashlytics when you're running your tests, right? You want them to trick up into the test system, and then you can you'll catch them as actual errors in your tests. Definitely a thing you want to do. And back to the question as a hand, when should you read through, when is a suitable place layer? For myself, if you're using sort of a repository kind of model, layered model, domain model, the service layer, I let the service layer, which is like the sort of layer nearest the network, that's the thing that does all the API calls. That layer always throws, right? It might catch like a HTTP error, like a 400 as Daniel was saying earlier, and then manipulate that into a API exception, right? But it will still throw. Then it's the layer above that is due to catch that exception. And then that layer will then maybe emit an error or change its state in some fashion to reflect, that error has occurred, or how to mitigate the error and how to handle that situation. And then finally the front end, which calls maybe those functions in the repository layer, has zero exception handling at all. It shouldn't ever get an exception. And if it does, that's a bug.
And for libraries like that, when you write your documentation, notice I didn't say if. When you write your documentation, it's helpful then to include in that method description, throws this, why, throws this, why. So even though it's not required by the language, we can implement it as humanware. So at least we understand how things are. Boy, it'd be great if there'd be a lint somehow. No, you can't tell if something throws something.
You can put lint. There is lints for the Dart docs, I think, like Java doc on TypeScript and stuff. Like you can say force that you had to have the explanation of parameters and return types in comments in the Dart doc. I think there's one for that.
But anyway, but put this in humanware then. So document your method, that this method may throw these things and why, and you will definitely make your consumers of your project much happier. Definitely happier. If we beat that to death, can we move on here? Okay, so what's the best way to support RTL languages like Arabic if you don't know anything about them? Wow. That's Simon again. Go, Simon.
I mean, the one thing I don't have an answer really, but one thing that annoys me is if I'm laying out stuff, for example, with a stack, it annoys me that positioned doesn't have any right to left or left to right kind of concept, and you have to like tell it, I want to be in this far off from left or this far from right.
It does have it does. There's a named constructor for it.
Align directional.
Okay, good. But it's like, but I mean, and padding is also one that's just left and right, right?
No, there's a directional version of that as well.
Awesome. See, I'm learning here. Thank you, Richard. I've learned here.
Thanks for the question because it's helping us get informed. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah.
So there is
And y'all
actually
are joining our discovery process. It's all good. We're learning in real time here. This is great.
let's see if I
All
can
right.
actually load. Why not? Hang on. Let's see if I can. Does that come out?
Good. We get code. Let's do the lookups. I've so missed.
Yeah.
I'm so missed Simon Googling for things while
You've
we're
got
talking.
alignment directional,
Yeah.
which is used.
Yeah.
So this actually has start.
Okay, good.
There's a where is it? Statics. I can't find it now.
Starting
Yes, you have bottom end, bottom start, center.
Yeah.
End. So the difference between start and end is start would be left side on left to right languages, and start would be right on right to left languages, and vice versa for end. So end would be the right hand side for left to right languages, and so on. And then you've also got edge insets, directional for when you want to use the directional one. That has the same thing. It's from step, start, end, start, top, end, bottom, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, start, end. So the idea of using these is you're explicitly saying these are allowed to be swapped, whereas left and right are not. And you talked about positioned. If I remember rightly, there's a position directional.
Position directional. Wow.
That makes me very happy. Thank you.
But it is too common that people go straight for like positioned, right?
Yep.
And then they put and it is I've seen it in so many apps, and I'm guilty of this as well, and doing putting in your right value and left value. But as soon as you see yourself putting a value in left and right, you think to yourself, okay, let me use a directional, right? And do start and end. Literally, there should be no problem like to do that for the most part, and then you get that kind of like free of charge when you go to a right to left language. There is on Android, if you go into the developer options, if you enable the developer option section, there's actually in fact, one of the developer quick access tiles as well is switched to like fake right to left. So it's still English, but it sets the language to be right to left. There's also one with wacky characters, so you can see how your app works with like, it still reads kind of in like English, but it uses like omega symbol for O and weird things like that that can mess up your layouts. So there's again a nice way of testing your layouts in terms of locale support.
All right,
nice.
It's the bottom of the hour, so I think the bottom row may have to go.
Bottom row, bottom of the hour.
All right. Well, thank you for coming. Thank you for hanging on.
Yep.
Great seeing everybody. Until how many hours till I come back, Randall?
166, right? Is that what it is?
165 and a half. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
No, 166 and a half. Sorry, 166 and a half. We're still.
Oh, yeah.
I can't believe we're this early in the show still with this few questions. This is great. Actually, we might actually.
Just for those that want to know, there's a discount code in the chat right now for a discount on Joy-Con London this month. So grab it when you can. Right. Then there was two.
Really fast, quickly. Just rewind the tape and go back to that.
No, it's in the chat. So if you need to.
Oh, it's in the chat. Oh, that's easy. It's in the chat. That's text then. I've been using it. I have a hotkey now for OCR, a region of the screen. And it's been so handy. I've been grabbing long sections of text from screens.
It just reminded me, there's some of those like game bots and things that actually like do screen grabs of the screen, and then they look for where like the score is and things to kind of like monitor the stats of the game. Because screen recordings are loud, whereas if you peer into the memory and try and debug the memory of the game, it will trigger a cheat thing and mess you up.
Very cool stuff. So here's a question for me. I'm using Riverpod to set the loading state. I need to push a new page as soon as the loading is done without triggering a rebuild on the current page. So what you're doing then is in your callback, the thing that's triggering this, you're going to want to wait for that provider's .future, because you can get a future out of a provider for its page state. And then just use that to do your navigation. That won't rebuild the current page while that's going on, because it's not, unless you're also watching the rebuild of that provider as part of your parent data for the current page. That's the only reason that would trigger them. So yeah, that's basically it. Remember that every provider has provider.future, and that will return a future that you can wait for.
Yeah, I'm also saddened by the fact that it says without triggering a rebuild of the current page. That literally, you should be able to trigger as many rebuilds as you want for your current page without any problem with your app. If you're
120 times a second on my new phone, 120 times a second.
If you trigger a rebuild and it causes a problem for your app because you have side effects from your build, you're doing it wrong, right? Because like you can't control that. You can't control when rebuilds are going to happen. Let's say the user flips away from your app and comes back, and it refreshes the screen, causes a rebuild, and then your side effect takes place and messes up your app, right?
Yeah.
So think about how you're managing your state. That you don't get triggering rebuild should not be a problem at all for anything inside your app.
Exactly. All right. So we've waved our fingers. On to the next one. Here, how to use equality with a sealed class. Is equality can we put on the base or on the subclasses? I guess it have to be on the subclasses. So
I mean,
right?
It really depends on what your quality is checking. I mean, it doesn't matter that it's sealed or not. I mean, if you've got a class and you use an inheritance and you have subclasses, so you have your base class, you have your subclasses of that, then if you're not adding any fields for comparison, then yeah, it can all be in the base class, kind of, because you're making apples to apples comparisons. It doesn't matter the different types, but as soon as it's a type starts adding additional fields that you need to make comparisons with, then you're going to need to override that base equals in each subclass. So what you can do, what
you can use with equitable, like if you use with equitable, if you use with equitable, equatable, whatever, equitable, it looks like equitable, and then so then you put props in on your top level base class. You just have to override props for your derived classes if they have a different collection for props.
So the package. So just for those that don't know, the package that that Randall's talking about is called equatable.
Yep.
This is it here. There's a fast equatable as well. I don't know what that is, but this one is managed by the fast community, made by Felix, the guy who does Block and a few of the other packages in the community. And the idea is basically, let me zoom in on that. So you have like a person class like this, and you want to make a comparison. So rather than this is what you have to normally, you override your equals operator, check see if it's an identical match. Is the other thing you're comparing to a person? Is the runtime type the same? Then is the name the same? This is like the set of operations you need to do, and then hash code as well. Since there's only a name, we pass over that, but then you should use object.hashcode, which is a global function. If you're doing this, don't ever use XOR. It's not good enough. Especially when you start getting lots of fields. The more fields you get, the more collisions are possible with XOR. Anyway, so then this
will see older code do that though. So ignore that. That's the way we used to do it before we had object.hashcode. And also, it's probably the only way ChatGPT knows how to tell you. So ignore GPT once again.
So this package is designed to sort of make this easy. You can extend. I think you can use it as a mixin as well, but equatable, and then you just give a list of properties. Then it will do all that you need to do with those properties to make the comparisons. It's meant to be that simple, right? You just add this override and say extend to equatable, and then it just magically does what it needs to do to make it a what was it called? Podo, plain old Dart object.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just another little bonus you get if you put stringify true. Then it will also implement in your class. It also implements toString and outputs like a nice little. I don't think it's got an example here. There's the mixin. It will output like a nice little string version of your class. For those that don't know, actually, there's a great part of the SDK, if I can find it, which was describe identity.
Oh yeah.
If it loads. For some reason, when I click on search results, it takes a while. There you go. Describe identity. And if you run this on any object, what you get back is its type, its short hash code. You can see that here. it gets object runtime type. If it's been removed, you get optimized out, and then you get a hash followed by the short hash code. And this basically prints out if you need to identify an object when you're like in your logs for debugging, use this. If you put in a toString, that works as well. But the point here of this function is that it gives you the type and specifically a hash of the hash code, and this allows you to identify, is this object exactly the same instance as another object? It's going to be very good when you're trying to fight the what's the word? Like fight some of these bugs where you might have like multiple isolates and things like this, where you have multiple instances of singletons, which people can get confused by. Right, each isolate is going to have its own singleton. Right,
scary stuff. All right, see anything else I can add to that? Probably not. That's good. Yeah. I'm now inspired that I want to, after we get done with the show, I want to go into both Bard Chat or Bing Chat AI and Bard and ask them if I have a Dart data type with a first name and last name, how do I make sure that I have a working equality code for it? That'd be cool. See what it actually comes up with. See if it does.
I wonder if you're intelligent enough right now to come up with object.hashcode.
Ooh, yeah, so that clever way to clever barometer to tell how recently the chats have been programmed. We're just evil here, though. That's kind of what that all is. Let's see here. Let's show this one. So Android 14 is released. New restrictions are coming. So like winter is coming. What is that about? I don't know.
I mean, this is the same. If I think I'll bring this up. All the Android versions make changes, and they make changes after monitoring what people are doing with the platform. But Android came out, just to be clear, Android has always come out with a perspective of openness and restriction where required, where iOS comes in from restriction and then openness as needed. Which those two things do not meet necessarily equally in the center. So when you're trying to do cross-platform on both, there's a gray area in between, which means that some things may work on Android but not on iOS, and vice versa. Right? I'm going to have a quick look and we'll see what let me just bring up the release notes here. See if I can find it at least. And I'm failing to find the thing I want. My Google foo is lacking today.
Well, you've been distracted by taxi writing. Taxi writing takes it out of me. So,
here we go. Let's make this bigger.
Enhance.
So what we got here? Release notes. Android 14. Improvements. Initial release. General support, features to test, large screen user per app overrides, top resolved issues. No, where's all the?
It's not like what it did differently. It doesn't say. Oh, learn about the latest release. There's probably some video now that we have to.
Behavioral changes.
Yep.
So what's going to affect all apps versus what's going to affect this, and what new features they're going to be. Multi-window full screen API. Interesting. Process handbooks for to pick a.
Can't let Flutter get ahead of that, so they're going to have to keep adding stuff to Android.
So let's skim back up and go to jump straight in, see all new features and APIs.
Okay.
What is that? Okay. Read the features and APIs. Read the API diff report. Oh, this is actually something I want to just talk about briefly. This is something I've always found really helpful. There's an Android API differences, and it's a little generated report, and it shows you all the removals of what things have been removed in this API version, what's been added. You can see like what new functions or what new parameters have been added along the way, and then what changes have taken place as well. So like what things have got changes, and then you can go look at those. It's really, really helpful when you try to track a big code base like Android to see what's changed. I'm hoping to build something like this for Flutter, because I'm at the point now where I can no longer keep track of what's coming in and out of Flutter. Like, it's just it's just too much and I'm too busy. So hopefully something like this would help a lot of people keeping track of all the changes that are happening inside Flutter. Anyway, per language preferences, automatically generating apps locale config. Okay. Dynamic updates for an app's locale config. App language visibility for input method editors. Okay, so basically the keyboard can know what app language has been set. Okay. Grammatical inflection API. Okay.
Inflection. Wow.
Right.
That's
like,
tricky.
Like gendered languages and stuff. Yeah. Regional preferences. Get temperature. I mean, they. What's this? New Android settings for temperature unit, first day of week. So, by the way, all of these things kind of automatically come from the locale the device is set to. And I think their idea is that you can override, the user can override these if they want to. So even if they're America, they can change the first day of week to Monday instead of Sunday, or same for temperature unit. They could use Celsius instead of Fahrenheit if they wanted to, right? It's same difference.
Well, no, Sunday is usually the first day on our calendars here in the US.
That's what I'm saying. First is and it's not in the UK, it's Monday.
Oh, really? So your calendar actually starts on Mondays?
Yeah, Monday through to Friday, then Saturday, Sunday. So
wow.
First
okay.
Monday.
Wow. We like our weekdays bookended by weekends, I guess. Nicer to think that you're just kind of working there in the middle, but you're really working from weekend to weekend day. The stuff in the middle is just to pay for the two endpoints.
So this is interesting.
Non-linear font scaling. Wow.
Yeah, so we saw this before with...
Is that to make ransom notes? You can make a ransom note with changing every character.
The point here is that you hardly ever want to have like sizes scale linearly. Like they don't normally scale linearly anyway. Like when you go up in heading sizes, they get big quick, right? There's a ramp up, right?
Right.
But sure, they've got a bunch of stuff around that to affect how that works, basically. SP units for line heights, sure. Ultra HDR. Oh no, it's USB all over again. We're gonna have like fast, ultra, mega ultra.
20 gigabytes for a 5-minute video. Yeah, that's gonna be great.
It's like just like how do you describe like sometimes it's nice just to say like what's it like we have what is it like you have like half HD, full HD, quad HD. Right. It's like just maybe just use it with like HD1, HD2, HD3, HD4 or something like that. Just people know that HD4 is better than HD3 because connotations on wording like ultra fast, they're all mean like greater, right? So it's like you don't know, like if you ask someone what is faster, ultra USB, I can't remember what they were now. All the USB, there's like names. 4 or 5 of them. And you're like, I have no idea which one is faster than the other, right?
And then Ultra V3 versus like Mega V1 or something, and it's like, but they're overlapping. It's just weird. I don't understand why there's not just one number that says it runs this fast.
Okay, so this is like it's about 10-bit HDR range.
Right, there we go. Cool.
Put it back compatible with JPEG images, blah blah blah. SDR ranges. Okay, so you need to set either through a manifest entry or runtime set color mode to be able to use it, and you get a gain map. So this is interesting. Yeah, so you can use them in OpenGL Vulkan. I'm not sure what Flutter's stance is on HDR at the moment. I can't remember if it's supported in the framework or not. But with Impeller's change, the change that Impeller brings, I don't see a reason why HDR wouldn't be possible, or just get out the box. I think a lot of this stuff kind of comes out the box with the platform that you're running it on, because it does depend on the screen that you're running the app on. Obviously, like you can't put HDR, you can't say your app's HDR and then run it on a screen that is not HDR, right? It doesn't work that way.
Right.
That's like those old TVs. Those old TVs that would have like movie mode or whatever. And they're futs with like the gamut range of color. So even though it's still 8-bit, it's just like we're going to make all the whites ultra bright and all the blacks ultra black, and it's like yes, but you just messed up the entirety of this. Like on a dark film, like a horror film, you would just get all the blacks collapse. You can't see anything.
You kids, you have it good now. Back when in the day, we had 256 colors in one picture, and that was enough.
Back in my day.
GIFs were everything and everywhere. We didn't need more than 256 colors as long as they were chosen correctly.
That's it. You're not my friend anymore. You said GIF and not GIF. That's it.
I pronounce it the way the guy who created it pronounced it.
That's I completely disagree with him.
Well, too bad. Too bad. Let's go on to the next question before we get really distracted here. Or you're still
right, let's move on. Right. Zoom focus, post view, camera. Oh yeah, okay. So lots of new camera functionality that you can use. In sensor zoom, sure. Lossless USB audio, great. I mean, there's like very specific applications for this. Like if you're building like a DJ application, some specific audio thing, you're going to need this, right? If you're building some like camera app or something, then you're going to probably want all these things. But generally speaking, most apps don't really need these specifics. They're great that they're making these advancements to the platform, though. Credentials manager, yeah, blah blah blah. Sign-in solutions, passkeys, sure. Health Connect. Wonderful. OpenJDK, skip.
Yeah.
We don't really care about Java, but pattern matching. Oh wow, look, pattern matching for instance of and seal classes. Wonderful. Oh,
nice. They're catching up.
Improvements for app stores. Oh.
Package installer. More ways that things can break. Wonderful.
Request install approval before downloading. Okay, interesting. Request user pre-approval. Installs request users approval before committing to an install session.
You can just put your entire code.
A lot of these things are like this is like a change that improves the overall package installation thing, but it's very specific, right? Claim responsibility for future updates. Allows install to indicate the system that it intends to be responsible for future updates. These kind of I tell you what, who would like these? Shorebird, things like that, like that where you can take over the upgrade pipeline and say, I'm going to be the update owner for a package, right? I'm sure something like that works. Update apps in less disruptive times. Oh, I've seen this. This is another thing that is totally annoys me. Sometimes you can. Have you ever been using an app and it just disappears off your screen like it's crashed?
Yeah.
And then you look and then you look at your notifications and go, oh, Play Store's installing updates. You're like, oh, it just updated the app that I was currently using. Great.
Yeah, I have
down, updates it, and it doesn't launch it again and back to where you were or anything. Like you're like, great, thanks. So make update apps at less disruptive times. Yes, I want that.
The tool that I'm using to produce my podcast right now, my video casts, is Descript, Descript, so Descript, and they actually fixed a strategy that they were using before, where you would be in the middle of an editing session, and it would go and then just go away because it came back. Oh, it's updated. Well, it would kind of recover your editing session. But let's say you're working on it against a deadline. It's like, hey, I'm trying to get something done here. And I don't know very many people who are producing content that aren't against some deadline. So it was really annoying. Yeah. Anyway.
So if people don't know, you can do the split APKs. So you can break your APK up into like more modular levels. So this is especially important for really large apps because there's limits on APK file sizes. So you might have to this is mainly for games and things like that. But yeah, set don't kill app allows an installer to indicate the app is running. Processes should not be killed when installing new split APKs. That's interesting. Anyway, app metadata bundles. Sure. Detect when users take device screenshots. That's interesting. Create a more standardized experience for detecting screenshots. Android 14 introduces a privacy-preserving screenshot detection API. This API lets apps register callbacks on a per-activity basis. These callbacks are invoked when the user is notified when the user takes a screenshot whilst the activity is visible. So at the moment, the only way to if you can't like you're let's say you're on, I don't know, let's say you're a banking app and you're taking like some account information, you don't want it to like be able to be screenshot because that's confidential private information. So in that situation, what you in Android, you set a flag on the activities window saying that it is secure. And what happens is if you ever take a screenshot, it just blacks it out. It's just black. You cannot even capture it. It's like done at a very low level. But that's if you want to stop screenshots, that's the only protection you have right now on Android. On iOS, it's even worse. On iOS, it's insane. Anyway, so having a screenshot detection API is great. And this is a nice way of, Payout detected this screenshot. Like you can detect if someone's taken a screenshot and I guess do something about it. I don't know if it lets you override the screenshot, stop them.
Add them to a spam list. Automatically adds them to a spam list.
The problem with all these, I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. That's what I was going to say. The problem with all these APIs, it's great and all, but this is on Android 14 and above. So if you want your app to work on anything below this version, then you just don't get this functionality. So it's great that they talk about all these new features for Android 14, but if they're new APIs and new functionality, you're not going to see them for a good period of time until your user base, your installed user base of your app is running Android 14 for the majority, like 95%, right? Otherwise, you're going to lose 5% of your audience if they can't upgrade to your app, right? Because you're now, say, 14 and above, right? That's the kind of thing that you have to be careful about when looking at these new APIs.
That is a nice feature of Flutter that often gets talked about in Flutter is that you're bringing your own kit. So you're basically able to control and precisely make pixel for pixel representations that have a certain behavior that you can count on at the time that you build it, regardless of how old the equipment is that they install it on. You're not having to respect, except for if you're doing like deep interfaces with the API. But most of the time, just drawing things on the screen can be done with whatever the current SDK is. It's done.
It's also the deterministic nature that you get from a build. So you get to know that Dart behaves a certain way. You get to know that the GC behaves a certain way, and you can guarantee that, right? Whereas, different versions of Android operating system have different behaviors in those respects. And then, again, like long of the days have gone now, but a lot of the time, the manufacturers would modify the theming system and have all buttons be rounded, even in developers' apps. And then you're like, well, I don't want that. And then you have to override that on the specific device type. Got a bit nuts a long time ago, but yeah. Share screen custom actions, add custom actions to sharing. Great, cool. So you can like share to people inside your app or whatever. Great. Improve ranking for direct share targets. Support built-in custom animations for predictive back. The predictive back piece is coming. I did speak about this on a previous stream. There's actually a Flutter dev page on this. Let me see if I can quickly dig this up. It's in the breaking changes, upcoming breaking changes. Let me just let me just bring this up here. So in the breaking changes, there is not yet in a stable. Here is nonlinear font scaling. We'll be supporting that. I do not see. Oh, has it made its way in already? I don't think so. I do not. Scale tabs. Well,
there was something in the Flutter.
Hang on. Back. Oh, predictive back. Oh, I'm just blind. There we go. Android predictive back. So this is support Android 14's predictive back API. So these are all the API changes that are coming. So pop scope is going to change on pop invoked instead. There's there's a bunch of because the idea here is that we need to tell the platform, can the screen be popped? Can the screen be popped as in, off the stack before before the user takes the action? Whereas the old system is when the user presses the back button, you get notified and then you can deny it, right? So for predictive back to work, we need to notify the operating system that if the user can go back or not. So that's the difference in the two sort of design patterns. So this means that will pop scope changes to pop scope, and then you there's a bunch of things like this basically where up front you're migrating to a model where pressing back means do not pop or pop, blah blah blah. Anyway, you can look through this yourselves when you get 5 minutes if you're interested. But it's a bit of a way off at the moment still. Landed version. Oh, so it landed in 3.14 pre. So we should see it in the next stable. Cool. So that's going to be a big change. But it's better that we handle these things like this gracefully and actually have all the information that we need to kind of keep an eye on these things than alternatives. Anyway, cool. Let's just briefly, before we want to get back on topic here. Some more questions like
other topics instead.
Let me let's just get back to a couple of little changes down here. So the predictive back, skip all that. Large screen OEM per app overrides. Okay, sure. Large screen user per app overrides. Graphics paths are now queryable and interpolatable. That is not a word.
What would the word be then? Interpolable? Not interpolate? I think that's pretty close to a word.
No, don't get me wrong, but I love the way it's like queryable. Oh. It's probably also another one. Like you just put, we always do this. We put ABLE on every word, and it's like, it's a word.
Right.
You know what we mean.
Yes.
To create paths, you call methods. You got path iterator. Yeah, this is great for if you're trying to do some fancy animations, like some of the morphing tweens and things, probably. So the morphing tween, by the way, for those that don't know, if you've ever seen like a plus turn into a negative, like in a rotation, or some of these other little icon kind of tweens that like morphing animations that take place, they work because exactly the same number of points are in both graphics. So, for example, the plus one works by the plus symbol, the top points being in the position of the left and right points on the second at the end on the end frame. And then it will migrate, basically linearly interpolate those points from one to the other, but it has to have the same number of points, which is a really difficult thing to actually achieve. What's better is that you do something like this, where you can just query a path, and somewhere along the path at like 50%, give me that point, and it can like nicely morph between the two. Custom meshes and vertex and fragment shaders, wonderful. This is great if you're, I guess, doing that. We don't need it, but great. Hardware buffer renderer for canvas. Lovely. This has like implications, right? So like these things can be used by
Impeller,
Flutter itself, or no, Impeller wouldn't use this level. Impeller uses directly with like the graphics hardware, GPU hardware anyway. Okay. But if we do like need the system to be able to load pre-made shaders, taking advantage of some of the platform features for that, great. But again, this is the problem, right? We do this on Android, then what do we do on iOS, right? Same for this. We got hardware rendering canvas is great, but can we use that on iOS? No, this is an Android thing. So this makes sense for native apps, but nothing that we need for Flutter. Anyway, that was the end of those changes. Looks interesting. I don't think there's anything I'm like. It's probably more the behavioral changes that are. I'm gonna, before we jump into a question, this is the behavioral changes for apps, which means that regardless of if you target 14 above, what you're going to be stuck with. So basically, if your app's running on Android 14, this is the list. I'll put this in the chat. This is the list that's going to affect you, right? Scheduled exact alarms are denied by default. No more exact alarms. You can only do one of the 15-minute segments. Context registered broadcasts are queued while all apps are cached.
Okay,
sure.
I'm sure that's implication.
Background. Apps can kill only their own background processes. That sounds like a good thing to do.
That sounds like it shouldn't have had any powers before that to make that happen. Yeah. We have 2 follow-ups on Android
minimum
14.
transition. Sorry. MTUs MTU size of 517 bytes is now set for the first GET client requested by MTU.
5.7.
So this is Bluetooth.
It's not a power 2. It can't be that. It's not a power 2.
Yeah, you know why? You've got the Bluetooth address plus like 512 or something like that, right? Like
yeah,
6 bytes or something like that.
So weird.
Sure.
I've had to learn about setting my MTU down deliberately when I've been on so many.
No, look at the end.
-5. I love it.
Sure, there's a minimum of 5 basically always. So
Yeah,
a reminder, you should reduce 5 bytes for the support size for the headers. There you go.
nice.
New reason for an app to be placed in restricted standby bucket. Okay, so apparently the app's jobs trigger ANR errors multiple times. There you go. So if you're doing background jobs that trigger Android not responding problems, then you're going to be put in the restricted standby bucket, and your app is maybe not going to work.
You get sent to the penalty box.
You do.
Nice. There's 2 follow-ups to Android 14 from the same guy, I think. So let's so there's this.
What?
I don't know what this means.
Wait, what? Okay, that's interesting. So mlock, right? Memory lock. So you can know. So when you're dealing with processing memory back and forth between threads, you need to lock that memory. This is especially for memory mapped stuff from the OS mlock. But it's saying that you can only lock 64 kilobytes per process before it was 64 megabytes per process.
That's quite a restriction.
That is quite a big change. It promotes better memory management across application system. I can see if you're doing some deep level like multi-threading stuff and stuff. This does make a practical difference because whilst the memory is locked, it can't be freed, right? So it allows the system with limited devices like with 512 megabyte like memory. That makes a big difference. It does mean though that all your transfers are going to be any sort of buffered transfers are going to be in 64K chunks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. System enforced cache app resource usage. By design, apps processes in a cache state when it is moved into the background and no other app process components are running. Such an app is processed as subject to being killed due to memory system pressure. If you don't know, that's how this works anyway. Yeah, basically don't do anything after unstop, sure. I think they'd just be more hard on this. So the fact that an app goes into the background and once it's been running in the background for a while, it will be shut down. I think they're just being more sort of. It sounds to me like they're being more on the case with it than just being like before. It was like you don't know what the operating system will choose. What's it called? ODM? No. There's a system. There's part of Android, part of the Android system, which is monitors processes and what they're doing, and determines what level of killability they are. So that's not a word, but it is a word now.
Killability.
User experience grant partial. Oh, interesting. Hey, minute. Wait, what? Grant partial access to photos and videos.
Just the top halves of them, or what?
That's what I'm trying to understand. What the hell does it mean? Because you can already grant access to like individual files. If you don't use I'm not sure I get that, but sure. Great, wonderful. Secure full screen intent notifications. Yeah. Full screen intents are basically how I'll give you an example here. If you're using one of these like chat apps like WhatsApp or whatever, or Facebook Messenger, you receive a phone call or whatever, it will pop up on your screen as like a full screen activity, immediately saying, pick up or hang up, the call. That is what's called a full screen intent. It's a way of pushing the user into something. I'm guessing this, they are. Send full screen instance while the phone is locked. Is automatically granted by using this. So that's nice. Improves the usability of those kind of things. Changes to how users experience non-dismissible notifications. Sure. Data safety information is more visible. Great. And then we talked about non-linear fonts. Minimum installable target API level can't be lower than 23. Well, we know that now as well. The app stores now, the Play Store has now enforced this, I think. So now you can't even deploy apps. All apps will get if they're not redeployed with the latest version, I think they're going to probably be taken off. So all those old apps that will probably die that haven't been updated. Oh, look, bypass low target SDK block if you need to test it. Media owner package names might be redacted. Wait, what? Oh, okay. That's interesting. Media store. So the media store is basically a it's called a data provider. Was it data provider? I forget now. Anyway, basically think of it like a little database in the system for where all the media is stored. So like if you want to access the gallery, you request it from the media store, and then it will give you a list of all the images on the device or whatever you queried for. And one of the columns will be package names, so you know which app owned or created that one media file. Well, that would mean, you would know if a lot of all these things came from WhatsApp or came from somewhere else, right? So I'm guessing this is now sort of a privacy concern that they found that this has been abused, so we're going to start restricting it. Yeah. You had to put in the queryable packages. This is the new thing, which is subject to play policy. Yeah. Android filter package visibility for privacy. Yeah. There you go. That's all. That's it.
Was this helpful? You gonna do an up arrow or an up thumb at the bottom of that page? Is this helpful?
Oh, was there? It was helpful. Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah.
It was helpful. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that was nice.
It was easy to understand. Submit.
We can't see that, but that's fine. All right. There's a couple things related to this. Let me show those here. So Android 14 source code release and merge today. Stable, not beta. So that's interesting. So that really is out today. Okay. And this other thing I think is related, 7-year update for Pixels, now like iOS. I don't know if that's really
basically we're just the new Pixel is going to get 7 years worth of updates, which is I absolutely love, because the amount of e-waste, I was talking to someone about this today, the amount of e-waste that we have in the world produced by mobile phones alone is ridiculous. Like everyone's like, imagine like you got, I don't know, let's say, I don't know how many people in America get a new phone every year. Let's just imagine how many people go get the latest iPhone every bloody year.
6 years for me.
Right, but this is what I'm trying to say. But imagine you got this certain amount of group of people they're going to get every year, every 2 years, whatever, and all that e-waste. Where do you think those phones go? Like, not a lot of them get recycled directly off because, like, their batteries need replacing or the screens are broken or whatever. And it all just goes into an e-waste pile. That e-waste pile gets dumped off in a town in Africa, right, by barge or whatever, and then people burn it and get all the plastic, they just burn it to get rid of all the plastics and all the other bits out of it, and they're left with the precious metals, which they then trade in. But all that goes into the atmosphere. Yeah. And also it hurts you, like all the people there that are actually doing this to make a living, it damages them, right? Their lungs and everything. It's terrible. Sorry I'm happy that they're doing this kind of thing, because hopefully this means that people are, holding on to the devices for a lot longer.
That would be nice. Yeah. If I had grandkids, I'd be really upset about the direction the Earth is heading. But sadly, I'm orphaned at this point. Or not orphaned. What's the word? Childless at this point. Yeah. So anyway, let's look at a few other things. Well, we're on that happy note. Is there a service like Apple's test flight for Flutter on all platforms, or do you have to set up each one separately? Isn't there like a Flutter test bed
there's a Firebase distribution something or other, isn't there? I think it does it on both. I'm not sure. To be honest, there's been a couple of attempts at this. The problem is each platform does it independently, and no matter what you end up doing, I think the way that a lot of platforms were doing it, I think this was before test flight actually came out. I can't even remember, it's such a long time ago. Was using Apple's enterprise certificate signing system. And then you deploy it as an enterprise app internally so that you can test it. It's just use a CI system, use Fastlane, use whatever you want to just automate the deployments to test flight and to Play Store and to whatever platform you want. And this is the problem. This is a problem space, and there's not really a good solution, because none of the providers, they'll have different features. They want to do different things. They all have different sets of requirements. So they're all going to have different APIs.
And
So
there's no incentive for them to cooperate either, because they're trying to get you siloed into their platform. So it doesn't make any sense for them to cooperate like between iOS and Android. There's no real reason for the separate teams at Apple and Google to cooperate on that level. So we have it lucky with Flutter in that the code runs everywhere, but the back end stuff is different.
Really still does surprise me that the software industry has not got these groups of people from different companies come together as much as I feel like in the past that has been a thing. And also on hardware, it's like you have like literally rival companies like Apple, Samsung, Toshiba, Dell, all joining like a consortium of companies about a standard like USB. So they all produce the same connector that everyone can use and everyone can move forward, right? And it's that kind of thing that we don't see a lot of in the software world. And when we do see it, it is very much at the lowest level, right? So it's always like protocols and communication and things like that. It doesn't make its way higher up the stacks. Like in this case, like try and get me in the same room to talk about this, you probably wouldn't happen, right? So anyway, there's companies that exist out there. For example, Richard, there's CodeMagic, and CodeMagic's literally their platform is to support this kind of thing. You fill out their platform with you go through the process of set up your credentials with the Play Store, follow their guide and with the Apple App Store, and then it will just magically deploy to those platforms for you. Is the idea, and they produce the guides of what buttons you need to click. But sadly, the stores are complicated, and you just have to deal with it. They're basically a monopoly on their customer install base.
And although you talk about open standards and stuff, but then you have Apple creating their Lightning connector that's been used for a decade now. And now finally my iPhone 15 now I have to buy USB devices for everything because they went to USB-C like the rest of the world has already gone. Yeah, so that's good. Great. That's good that it's now standard, but there are still times when they get these pockets of unique connectors that so the hardware world isn't quite perfect either yet, but at least
no, but that's an example of when companies are not joining. I'm trying to remember what Apple joined some. Oh, that was it. AVIF. AV1 is a audio video compression format that's the new hotness, and it's got better compression rates than MP4. Basically, that's X264 for those that don't know. And X265 is VP8 or whatever. It's like the one up from that. Now there's AV1, which is one up on that, the next generation, if you will, of compression technology. And Apple joined that on the bandwagon on that, and they've added AVIF, that's AV1 image format support to Safari and to the browsers, and now everyone can actually use the same image format across all the platforms. It only took 20 years.
Yeah, definitely. Well, GIFs were cross-platform.
And you know what I mean? Like GIFs and JPEGs fine, but it's when they start introducing new formats, it's like, oh, we can't use that because Google invented WebP. We can't use VPA or this and MP4, and also licensing around other standards as well. Like AV1 is there's an openness to it. I can't remember what it is at the moment, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's move on. We're already at 2.25 hours, so let's keep going.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
How to use mixin for caching state in an async notifier in Riverpod. Well, you create a mixin class and then you mix it into your notifier class. I'm not sure what the question is there. The nice thing about the design of the notifier is that all of the life cycle states, like on dispose and on update and that sort of stuff, are all additive. So you can have a mix-in that adds more methods for a particular slot and lets you compute all that. So that's really nice. So I don't know what the detailed question is. However, I bet if you hang out on either the Flutter Discord, the channel is called State and Architecture. That's typically where Riverpod stuff ends up there. Or there's even a completely separate Riverpod Discord that can be identified. I'll see if I can find an invite link to it and put it in the chat. But that's a great place to get your Riverpod questions asked, because there's people 24/7 that are specifically spun up on Riverpod and can answer nice questions like this. you want to add anything to that, or do you care? You don't.
No, that's fine. It's all yours.
Okay, great. Here's this one. Where is it? Right there. How clean is clean architecture? It depends on how hard you scrub. What do you want to say about this?
How much polishing do you want to do?
Hold on.
So, Random actually let us know that in America right now, there's an emergency alert going off. So if you're in America, you're getting that on your mobile phone as a test. So
they said 11:30. It's 11:18. I was going to turn my phone off at 11:29. Okay.
Well, you got the test, so you know it's working.
Oh, it works. We know it works.
When they did our test in April, they did a test of our system, and they realized some things didn't work. So it's good they did a test. How clean is clean architecture? Any feedback on boilerplate code?
Sorry for the interruption.
To be honest, consistency. I think the problem with code, the way you write code, is you can do anything you want, and you can start calling methods from other classes and create statics everywhere and do this and do that and do the other. And you end up with this mess of interactions between your code, and it's very difficult to untangle. And that's called spaghetti code. So the clean architecture is mainly it's just about making that lovely layered cake that you have. These interactions go to the layer underneath, that layer goes to the layer underneath, and that layer goes to the layer underneath. And therefore, with this clean architecture, now it doesn't have to be that kind of approach, but the point here is, as long as you're consistent in your behaviors and you don't start reaching between multiple layers and doing all this complex glue code, then it's easier to understand and easy to work with. And it's purely where it comes from. Boilerplate, if you've got boilerplate, then you're doing it wrong, in my idea, right? There's a certain amount of it, but if you're just putting code in for the sake of putting code in, then you've probably got a problem with your architecture. What
I've resisted before when being told I have to code in clean way, I look at their code and they have 3 layers, and each layer has exactly the same named function call with the same parameters, calling the thing on the next layer, with the thing calling exactly the same thing on the next layer. It's abstraction inserted before you need it.
Yeah.
And 95% of the time, you won't need that level of abstraction. It's the same thing I say about people that are still creating abstract classes just so they can have the real class and a mock class for testing. That's overkill. You need to do it that way in Java, but in Dart, any real class can be the interface for your mock class for testing. So, well, almost any, if we don't talk about sealed classes.
I've seen some apps that follow the DDD model. I think it was mentioned earlier, domain-driven design or whatever it is, and you end up with, again, it's about doing something to the nth degree. You follow it on everything, and suddenly you end up with huge amounts of boilerplate, huge amounts of classes and everything, just trying to manage something that could have been done a lot simpler, right? So taking the principles of domain-driven design and applying them to your code doesn't mean you have to follow it exactly to the letter. Yeah, if that kind of makes sense.
Right. What I see is people there's use cases. I first stumbled across this only maybe a year or two ago, and it's they make this artificial code that just it doesn't exist except to kind of be an adapter from this thing over here to this thing over there. And it's okay, I think I get why that's there. I see people asking me questions I have a really simplified Riverpod model now that Andrea came up with that I've been doing, and I'll put that in the chat, which basically has views, controllers, services, repos, and API, and that's it. And the controllers are more about views, and services are more about data, and those both have state, observable state, because we're done with Riverpod. And so it becomes a very simple structure. But then people will ask me, well, can a service call another service? And I'll go, you're thinking about it wrong if you have to ask that question. Yes, a service can call another service, but sometimes that meant you really should have had it all in one service for a chance possible. But it's you write what you need. you use the stuff as guidelines and you write what you need. This is also like the folder naming conventions. It's like, oh, should we do it feature first or do it layer first? No, just do it in a way that you'll be able to find the files you want and that you have an obvious place when you come up with something. And if you don't have an obvious place, you have kind of a catch-all place. You can store stuff until you want to refactor it. Never underestimate the power of renaming a file. Because all your IDEs typically will update those now.
Just refactoring in general. Most people, we keep saying this, don't be scared of refactoring. Don't be scared to delete whole swaths of your code and redo it. Because at the end of the day that's how you're going to move forward, right? If you keep piling on top, piling on top, and piling on top, well, what are you going to get out of that? A mess, right? So, yeah. Anyway, I guess let's go for the final question, and then we'll...
Okay, yeah, there we go. So this is how to do integration tests in web using Flutter.
You don't. Currently, the testing support on there is ways of doing this. There is a page on flutter.dev. I believe it's quite lacking. From what I remember when I last looked at it, it was a while ago. I was chatting to Subdeclarative Matt Carroll about this a little while ago, and we found that it just wasn't there. Let's just have a quick look, see what they say. Testing Flutter apps. Do we have one on web somewhere? Let me have a quick look. I seem to remember. What was I looking at? I was looking at this recently. Yeah, running the browser. Here you go. So this is the integration testing page. I'll put the URL in the chat for those that want to follow along. And yeah, there's running in the browser. There you go. So you start with the Chrome driver. You have to have a test driver for the integration test, and use Flutter Drive instead of Flutter Test. Right? There you go. Flutter Drive. That's how you do it with local web server. But it's not. It's because of just the nature of a browser and the way it works, right? Like it's just not. It's not fully there yet, I don't think. Like it's just difficult. Web in itself is just another layer of difficulty.
Yeah.
You'd be happy that it works. That's really the feeling I have about the Flutter web is, hey, I kind of like Hummingbird came along. It did change some of the strategies. Yeah.
Also, half of this is like, this is why we have unit tests, right?
Yeah.
So you have layers of testing that, when you can't perform certain tests, you've got other tests backing it up, right? That's what I got for that.
And I don't see any other real questions coming up. Well, there's this, but that didn't put a Q in front of it. Remember to put your Q in front so we can see them.
Best
Otherwise,
CMS. I haven't
whatever you're familiar with. Yeah,
content management system. Yeah. I mean, whatever CMS you like.
Right. If it talks REST, we can get to it. If it talks gRPC, we can get to it. If it's
I mean, so a good example here is there's actually WordPress JSON. There's an API for WordPress, WP JSON. There's packages for that in Pub. You can go use JSON. Go and use WordPress as your CMS that supplies data to your app, and you use the JSON API and consume that in your Flutter app. But there's tons of these around there. You could go use Django if you wanted to as a CMS solution. There's like Superbase. You got Firebase. You can just use Firestore. I mean, like, basically, over on one side, you've got your CMS, which is how you input data, right? And hell, that could just be a Flutter app. You can just make a little Flutter app to input data into whatever next storage mechanism you have. And then you, on the Flutter app that's in production for your clients, for your users, that is your, just reads that data. And that's, you now got the essence of a CMS that reads Flutter apps, and it's.
I've got a client that's working with Superbase and has discovered that Superbase has integrated edge functions. So he's going to be able to deploy to CDNs, actually run his stuff in the cloud, essentially.
We've got, was it Invitator? Invitator working on, I'll advertise this for Invitator. We were chatting about this during F3 in Prague. So Invitays have been working on this product called Globe. And develop and deploy your Dart and Flutter applications on serverless global edge network.
Right.
Register your interest on the website. But yeah, the notion behind this is, yeah, you use their CLI to do deployments, and it will deploy your API or whatever on all the edge nodes written in Dart. Well, wonderful.
Cloudflare has demonstrated also that in their CDN you can run Dart apps. There's even a package, Cloudflare Edge or something in.
I think that's what this is based on. But the idea is that this is like infra that make services and infra that make it a lot simpler for you to do these kind of deployments.
Right. Yeah, definitely. If you haven't seen Cloudflare at all, you must be living under a rock. But Cloudflare has been really pushing the edges of edges. That's just crazy. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Before we give up for the day.
Why did you paste that in the wrong channel? Oh, there you go. Okay. I was going, why'd you paste it?
I put it in the right place. I put it in the right place now.
Okay.
Yeah, before we give up for the and
Sure.
call a show.
Never give up. Never surrender.
What was that from? What was that from?
Galaxy Quest.
That was it.
Yeah.
I was going to see that again. That's been a
The
while.
best Star Trek movie ever.
I'd be remiss in not telling people to
Yes.
go get your tickets to
London. Yes.
Droidcon coming up in London, and then also alongside that, Flutter London is running an event on the day before. So get registered, get on the websites, get this all going, and then we can hopefully see you this month in Flutter in London. All that kind of stuff.
When I finally get to travel again, I've got to come over the pond again. That would be a lot of
get your hips sorted out.
Yeah, that's now been pushed down. For those that didn't see last week's show, that's been pushed down now to December 19th. So that's when I'm going to be gone for probably a month from this show, because I have to get recovered, because I'll be horizontal. That's no fun for doing a show like this. Although that'd be kind of interesting, me laying on my back. And that answer is this. Yeah, right.
Put a green screen behind you, and we won't know.
Yeah, right. I'll be laying in this lake instead of sitting up here in front of the lake. Right. That's Crater Lake, Oregon, by the way, deepest lake in the U.S. Just have to promote it because a hometown boy here wants to promote Oregon.
Right.
It's great.
Well, cool. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Yeah,
and,
definitely.
We'll see you same time, same place next week.
Indeed. See you in 165 and a half hours.
Yep. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Push button.